It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome to the Jill on Money Show. We are delighted that you are with us this weekend. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. And it's Thanksgiving weekend. So maybe you're zipping around doing something, being very safe in your car. Maybe you are listening to us after the fact. Who knows? Maybe you're listening to us on YouTube. You can get us on YouTube. Mark has set that whole thing up. We are here to help you out, to help give you maybe a second opinion, a third opinion, another set of eyes, or two sets of eyes on whatever's going on in your financial life. And so the way you get in touch with us, it's very easy. You email us, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Askjill@jillonmoney.com. Oh, Mark, I almost forgot to mention that we are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios. Capital One, this is banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Well, the big news of the week in our world was the naming of Janet Yellen as Treasury Secretary of the United States. I'm just so thrilled about this. You know, this is a woman who has been a trailblazer. There aren't a zillion women economists who rise up to these levels, but, you know, she is an economist by training. She was the president of the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank from 2004 to 2010. And the funny thing that happens is that, you know, years later, they will often provide you with the detailed transcripts of what each Fed official was saying in these meetings, not just like, oh, here's the summary. And Janet Yellen was one of the first Fed officials who raised the red flag about the perils of the housing boom. So let's give her a little check mark on that. She was the vice chair of the Federal Reserve Bank from 2010 to 2014. So she and Bernanke, right through the beginning of the financial crisis, she took over as chair of the Federal Reserve in 2014. But now, you know, listen, after I was the first female head of the Council of Economic Advisors, the first woman to become the Fed chair, why not just become the first woman to run the Treasury Department? How about that? When we interviewed Mark Spindell, who wrote that big tome about the Federal Reserve, he had said I asked him, well, who is your favorite Fed official? And he didn't flinch. He said, Janet Yellen, no problem. That was it. That was his choice. I actually texted Mark because Mark happens to be my childhood friend. And I'm going to read to you what he wrote back to me because I wanted to find out on the day of what he thought. I wrote back to him, Janet, what are your thoughts? He says, fifth in line to be POTUS. I forgot the succession order. Okay. And he says, as I said to someone, once you've set the price of money, what's the big deal about spending it and signing it into action? Meaning that he almost feels like the Federal Reserve chair has more power than the Treasury Secretary. He said, seriously, it looks like the Treasury and the Fed and the Federal Reserve really need to collaborate during this period. Having her as Treasury Secretary ensures the interdependence of the two organizations, underscores the connection between fiscal and monetary policies. So markets liked it, people like it, and I like it. That's what I got to say. I like Janet Yellen. I hope she gets confirmed. Here we go. Got to get to your questions now. I know Mark's giving me the nudge. Okay, this is from Tasha, who writes, my husband and I are planning a possible work hiatus or early retirement from jobs in the education field. In 7 years, that's when our two older kids will be finished with high school. At that point, while we're still relatively young, we'd like to either teach internationally and or slow travel, homeschool our youngest child who will be 10. During this next phase, we'd rent out our house in California so that we can return a few years later in a work optional capacity, maybe when our youngest is in high school. We're 43 and 46. We earn $200,000 a year. Our current expenses, $60,000. It's pretty good numbers, huh? My husband will have a pension that he can draw at 53. It's $46,000 a year. At 55, my pension would be $36,000 a year. Both of us could defer drawing on our pensions until the full retirement age at 61 and a half, but in my calculations, the break-even point between drawing as soon as we are eligible and waiting the max multiplier is about 75 years old. We max all of our retirement accounts, blah, blah, blah. Okay. We have $140,000 in cash now and had planned on paying off the $100,000 mortgage on our home. It's valued at $650,000. However, we opted instead to refinance to a 15-year mortgage at 2.25%. Ready for the questions, Mark? Here we go. Since we're hoping to take a hiatus or early retirement while the older kids are still in college, should we stash some of the cash in two 529s for the older kids? We're in the 22% marginal tax bracket. Should we change some of our 403B or 457 contributions to after-tax contributions now so that we have more flexibility in retirement, or to have more control over the income we draw from our investments during those gap years? Or should we just try to do Roth conversions when our income is lower after we stop working? That's my choice. Do it later. I'll get back to the 529 question. My greatest concern in early retirement is healthcare costs. We need to reassess our need to return to the benefited world for a few years in our mid to late 50s based on those needs. We enjoy our careers. We would like to make different possibilities available to us in the future. I love your podcast, your uplifting attitude during these times. Thanks so much for any advice you can give. Okay. So what are we going to do about this 529? I want to look at the 529s right now. She didn't tell me how much money was in the 529s yet, did she? So I think that maybe, it sounds like you're asking whether you should put money into the 529s. Here's what I think. If you're going to do this, I don't think you should do anything that will tie up the money for any particular reason. I guess that right now, you have these kids, it's 7 years from now when they're finished with high school. And so do we have 7 years to get those kids for education? I would put new money in there. I would leave that $140,000 alone. I think you're going to need some of that cash. Maybe I'd put like 20 grand each in these 529s. You got to tell us about like what the heck is going on in these kids' lives. Are they going to go to state school or not? And in a weird way, if you are looking at this in 7 years and your income is down, oddly enough, they might actually, even if you have pensions, they might qualify for some sort of financial aid. Sounds crazy. I don't know. Mark, what do you want? You want to put the money in the 529 or not? Mark and I are both a little bit concerned that you might need this cash, so we're leaning no on the 529s. On the other hand, if you're just stockpiling cash over the next 7 years, then sure, then you can put some of that money in. But the most important thing, if you're going to have this period of time, is to have plenty of cash, and then when you later are able to convert your retirement accounts into Roth products, that you have the money available to pay the tax. So that's our advice. I am so far removed from this as a possibility that it's sometimes hard for me to think about it. I wish you the best of luck. I was just thinking on my walk with the dogs this morning how I want to work till I'm at least 70 and maybe 75. Mark has got to raise this child, and it's my job to help him get there. All right, you're listening to Jill on Money. And if you've got a financial question, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here to try to take the mystery out of your financial life. Yep, that's what we do. Mark and I, all we try to do all day long, just like smash down those questions. Let's go. Give it to us. And by the way, don't forget, we are starting to bring you guys back on the air with us. Mark is a technical whiz. He's figured it all out. So if you would like to join us on the program and ask your question live, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com and send us the question and say, I want to come on the air with you guys. And Mark will do the rest. That's what Lee did. She's on the line from Texas. Hi, Lee. How can we help you out?
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me.
Of
I am
course.
just curious if we're on the right track and if we're missing anything.
All right. Tell us what's going on.
Okay, so my husband and I, we're in our mid-30s, and we've got two preschool age children, and we'd like to have one more baby eventually. We both max out our 401k for him and a 403b for me, and our backdoor Roths. I'm in K through 12 education. I make about $67,000 a year. In my retirement, I have $128,000 in a Vanguard 403b. It's in a target date fund. 105,000 of that is in a Roth, 23 is in pre-tax. I've got $12,000 in a backdoor Roth IRA, and I've contributed the max for the past 2 years, and I'm going to continue doing that forward. And then I've got $23,000 in savings. My husband, he makes between $200,000 and $250,000 in big oil. He's got $630,000 in his retirement, and 90% of that is in traditional. He's got $75,000 in a Roth IRA. We've got $400,000 in a brokerage, and he on his end has $50,000 in savings. So that is it for the money. But then we've got two 529s from New York and Utah for our kids. We contribute $500 a month per child, and it's about $45,000 total in their accounts right now, and they're in preschool. We both have term life insurance for 10 times our income. We both have short-term disability. My husband has long-term. We recently refied our house to a 2.75% rate on a conforming 30-year, and it's where we want to stay. It's where we want to raise our kids, but it's a 1960s home. So we plan to fully gut and remodel it, and we have $200,000 put aside for remodeling right now, just in a savings and CD for that. And when we refied, we got about $700 a month in savings, and we're just dumping that into an S&P 500 fund. We're both eligible for pensions eventually, but we're not saving like we are. We're just saving because we don't really know what else to do with it, and we don't have any debt. So,
Did you say you were both eligible for pensions?
we are, but we're not acting like we are because, I've got little kids. I don't know if I want to be in education forever because I kind of feel like I could definitely use my skills in another avenue. And then my husband, he works for a really large company, and he's just seen what's happened in other industries. So nothing is guaranteed.
Let me just tell you what's guaranteed. You guys are kicking ass. You guys are kicking ass. It's unbelievable. I don't even know if I can add anything to this. I'm going to do the normal stuff like, now that you've done such a great job saving for retirement, saving for your house renovations in advance, saving for your kids, I'll go into more boring stuff. Estate planning.
So we get that through his company. We made wills, and they, work for each additional child. So we did it when we only had one. That's something that's important to us.
I don't even know what to tell. Mark, is there anything that we can add? I hate this girl. She's so good. She's so perfect.
So something I wanted to ask about was, both my husband and I, like my husband's getting his MBA. I have my master's. Education is very important to us. And I don't know what college is going to look like, but I have a feeling even if something's paid for, we won't be in the income bracket for that. So, I'm pushing my kids to go to college. We want it to be fully funded by the time they turn 18. So, I know you don't have like a crystal ball or anything, but I'm personally afraid to put too much in there because you can only use it for so much.
You're going to have 3 kids, right? I don't think you're going to end up overfunding.
Okay.
But, the reality is you guys are making a lot of money, right? You're in a pretty big tax bracket, but Texas has very good state income tax. Are your kids going to be going to private elementary, middle, and high school as well? Because I don't know. Someone told me a long time ago the Texas public schools aren't great. Is that true?
So I would say it depends on where you live. So that's the thing with Texas, because we don't have a state income tax. Your property taxes are super high because of the school. So traditionally, what's a good school district, it's sky high for Texas standards, So we moved from the hip part of town to an area with wonderful schools. And that's why it's $750,000 for a 1960s house. That's not a lot in New York, but it is in Texas. So, and we're going to stay there. But yeah, public all the way. And right now they're in a private preschool, which is when they get out of that, that'll be a savings.
Okay. I still think you're not going to overfund. How much money are in the 2 529s right now?
About $45,000 total.
I would do a little bit more.
Okay.
You'll probably need to get, they're young, right? So you're going to have the growth. And I love the tax-free aspect of it. So it is kind of neat to go, throw the money in there. And I think it's a good bet that they'll probably go to school. Maybe they'll all go to University of Texas at Austin and it'll be much cheaper than you think. I don't know. I don't think you're going to overfund. So, I mean, maybe for the next few years, you crank it up and we run the numbers again and see where you stand. But the only thing that we are looking at here, and you talk about the retirement contributions, is maybe you might consider having your husband shift more of his retirement contributions into a Roth rather than a traditional.
Right. So I've been getting onto him for that because he's big into investing too. And he's like, well, it's if you want me to take home less money, you can tell I'm doing my husband's voice when I do that.
I like that.
But, I'm all about, we don't know what's going to happen with tax brackets. So, I've listened to your show a lot. I think they're going to go up exponentially. I am a history teacher. So I'm like, look at where they were in the past. It was a lot. So I agree. I think that's something to look into as well.
Yeah, I think that using the Roth, it's tough because your tax bracket is such that, you kind of are splitting the difference a little bit, right? Because you're in the 24% tax bracket, right?
Yes.
I think he's going to make a lot of money in the future.
He's in his 30s, so he's got a long time to go.
So if we think about it, let's consider this. Let's say that I know that he wants to reduce the taxable income, and I get that. On the other hand, let's say between the two of you that you continue to make $300-ish thousand. It's very possible that $300,000 will not be a 24% tax bracket. It may rise in the future. And since he already has so much money in the pre-tax retirement traditional, it's a neat way to kind of hedge your bets. So if anything, maybe the one little tiny bit of change is that maybe he just goes 50-50. Right? Maybe he goes 50 traditional, 50% Roth. I know you're putting money in the backdoor Roth, so that's great. But every time I talk to anyone who's looking at tax policy and anyone who is planning in the future, there's always this notion that tax brackets, tax rates are going to be changing in the future. We don't know that, right? But to maybe play the possibility or the probability of that, it might make sense for him to split his retirement contribution between traditional and the Roth. See if he can, you're not going to get him to go from 90 to 0. So let's go 50-50. I don't think it's a terrible thing if he really is clinging to that. He really doesn't want to do that. I wouldn't worry, but I certainly wouldn't throw down and say that's it. That's the fight I'm going to have. But I think it would help to have more money that has already been taxed. And I think that would be great for you guys. Also, remember, let's pretend you do get those pensions. If those pensions do pay off, then of course what's going to happen is your tax bracket and your income is going to be pretty sizable in your retirement. So it's just a good way to make sure that some of your money's already been taxed.
Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. You're in great shape, Lee.
Thank you so much.
Okay, don't forget, if you want to come on the air, just like Lee, all you have to do is send an email, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com, or go to our website, jillonmoney.com, and there is a contact button on that website. You can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter, and don't forget, you can also subscribe to our sister broadcast. It's called Jill on Money. It's a podcast. It's right there on the front door. You'll see it, jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here to help you figure out what's going on in your financial life and what you need to do to get on a path to a brighter future. How about that? Who doesn't want that? If you have any kind of question that relates to money, career, anything like that, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Let's get to your questions. This is from Ronald, who writes, I'm a new book author, and I plan to publish my first book in a few months. Book royalty payments will be my only source of earned income. Okay. Are these book sale royalty payments a qualified source of income through which I could contribute to a Roth IRA? Well, they should be. I mean, royalties, it's just going to come in on your Schedule C. It's just, it's self-employment income. So yeah, do it. Rock and roll. Get that Roth contribution going. Let's see. Let me go to the next one. Christina says, if I'm happy with the plan that I had for Medicare, do I need to do anything or will I be automatically enrolled? You do. It defaults to an automatic enrollment of whatever you had. But I'm going to be a pain in the neck about this. I know. Could you just go and check out the Medicare tool just to make sure, even if you're happy, want to make sure that the medications you take are still covered, make sure that everyone, all the doctors are in your network, et cetera. You just run the tool. Okay. Here's another question about Medicare. Ken writes that he is now retiring. He's age 67, and his health care coverage ends on December 31st, which means, he says, I will be looking for the best Medicare plan for my needs. Here's the dilemma. Although I'm 67, my wife is 63. And since I'm not eligible for COBRA any longer because I have Medicare eligibility, what about her? Can you recommend a good course of action to make sure we both have coverage? Mark and I weren't sure about this, so we looked it up. This is kind of cool. Now, the COBRA law means that you get to continue coverage through your former employer for up to 18 months. The downside, you got to pay the full premiums, and so it's expensive. However, if you're getting your Medicare coverage, your wife can actually receive the coverage through COBRA, even if you don't take it yourself. So this is important. It says the rule is that you have to apply for COBRA within a certain time frame. Pay attention to those deadlines. You can go to this is the Department of Labor, I believe. This is where this comes from. Yes. So she'll be covered, but it ain't going to be cheap. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to deadlines, and try to coordinate also with your own benefits folks. They usually know how to do this. You're not the first person that has probably run across this issue. Okay, this is from Spencer, who's been listening to the podcast for some time now, and thanks for the information. Says, keep up the good work. I'll take it. Okay, Spencer's 29 years old, and he says, I've got 9 months worth of expenses in my emergency fund. Okay. How should I think about the order of importance into maxing out my Roth 401k versus my Roth IRA versus my HSA? I know the limits are $19,500 on the 401k, $6,000 for the Roth, and $3,550 for the HSA in 2020. Okay. I currently put 14% into my 401k. My company matches 50% on the first 6%. Okay. Should I continue with the 14 or should I only contribute the 6% to get the match and put the rest into my Roth IRA? Yes, that's exactly what you should do, because my guess is that you're 29 years old. You're going to probably make more money in the future. So I think that's the right decision. 6% in to get the match, then use the Roth. Okay, good. Now, the thing is, I don't know, maybe you could potentially use I don't know what the difference is in the investment options between your Roth 401k and your Roth IRA, but that would be something we might want to juggle the money between. Okay. Next. So then the question is, should I max out my Roth and HSA and then put the remaining in my 401k? I struggle to understand the right balance between the three. How would you rank the order of importance with maxing them out? It kind of depends how much money you have available. So I don't know how much you earn. So we didn't have that available to us. I think that I would probably look at you immediately you want to get the match. So we know that. And then I think I think the next one would be either the Roth 401k, Roth IRA, and as the next tranche, depending on which is a better plan. And I would weigh the money that's available equally with the HSA. So I think those are both really good options for you. But if you have money to do it all, then do it all. But I bet you don't. That's a lot. I guess I might tilt a little bit more towards the Roth. Maybe I would do that. That's a tough one. But let us know. Okay. All right, gang. So here's the deal. During the break, here's what I want you to do. Go to our website, jillonmoney.com. And there you can check out all of the stuff that we put out. We are content machines at this organization, right? And we have a fantastic research associate. His name is Theo, and he has been doing a fantastic, that's a joke, it's Mark's son. So when you're on the website, it's really all me and Mark, and you can read the stuff that I write and listen to past shows. You can watch TV hits and appearances, and check out the resource section. And you may want to come up with an idea for a holiday book. Maybe that's something on your list. Maybe you got to, what am I going to do? You can always buy my book, The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money, 13 Ways to Right Your Financial Wrongs. I think we still have a link to it somewhere or other. Is it on the website still, Mark? It has its own little category. My God, how quickly I forget. Amazing. Anyway, go to jillonmoney.com and you can get all of our great stuff. And if you're there and something is knocking around your head, a question pops up, just hit the contact button and we would be delighted to answer your question. Okay, we will be right back.
If you've missed any part of the show or want to check out a past show, go to jillonmoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you have a question that's bubbling up in your brain about anything money related, maybe it's career related, give us a holler. It's Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Mark, I just did the podcast with that woman, Debbie Epstein Henry, who we had on our show. And I listened to the podcast. And it was very weird to be the one who is interviewed versus being the interviewer. I'm not sure I like it very much, actually. But it was fun. Okay, now let's get to your questions. How's that? This is from Cornelia, who's got the greatest last name. I wish I could try to say it on the air, but I can't. It's so long and there are so many consonants in it. It's amazing. Wow. I'm trying to figure out what kind of name that is, but it's fantastic. Okay. Cornelia writes, after being a full-time stay-at-home mom housewife for over a decade, 2020 brought a divorce during the pandemic. Mark, I can't imagine anything worse than that. Okay, so Cornelia says, even though I hold a bachelor's degree in business management, I was aware that my skills were outdated. I returned to online education where I earned my CPCA certification in medical coding in hopes of working remotely. I'm over one half deaf, and jobs that require the use of phone or customer service don't work well. Okay. I never heard of that. CPCA. To secure a position as a coder, most places require in-house training. Many places are not hiring due to COVID. My son and I are now living with my parents to make it through without a job. I'm living off support from my ex who proposed. I can't even read this, Mark. I can't even. Okay, let me read it. I just read ahead and took my breath away. I am living off of support from my ex who proposed to someone else 8 days after our divorce. He knew her less than 2 months and we were together for 22 years. I don't even, Mark, come on. Mark says he's going to get his. Well, oh my God. All right. She goes on to say, this is the worst. I'm so sorry. I am left with approximately $100,000. Nowhere near where I need to be for retirement savings. I'm 49 years old. My money's in cash in a savings account until I can figure out how to invest it. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Cornelia, I don't think you can invest this. I think you've got to stay liquid right now, unless this is in a retirement account. I wonder if you got this money as part of a quadro, a qualified domestic relations order. If that's the case, if this is retirement, then I think that you can probably go a pretty cheap route, which would be to go to a hybrid online money management firm. And what does that look like? That looks like Betterment or Vanguard Personal Service Advisor, Schwab Intelligent Portfolio, where you will get some advice, but it will be really cheap. Now, if it's not in a retirement account, then we have a different discussion, because I think what that really does suggest is that you probably should hold on to that cash until you get back on your feet and with a job. I'm so glad you have your parents. I'm so glad you have your kid. It's an awful story. It's just awful. And if there's anything that we can do to help you going forward, then respond to this. Mark's going to send this to you, and we'll do more. But Mark, I don't know what to say. I can't think of anything worse than sometimes it's like a death is often easier to manage than the living with this kind of critical change in your life where you call so much into question. It's awful. All right. Nikki writes, hi, Jill. I love your latest book and the show. I have a sophomore in college who's got about $3,000 in savings that won't be needed for school. Okay. We're stuck between keeping that money in a savings account for use for post-graduation in 2 to 3 years, or starting a retirement account for him. If we go with a retirement account route, which type of product would you advise? A Roth IRA, et cetera? Yes, you would use a Roth. If we go the investment route and not touch the money in the near term, should we use CDs, a low-cost broker? Okay. Okay. If you think you're going to need it in 2 to 3 years, then you would just just pop it into a CD. Okay. Don't invest it. But I think that if you were going to really do long term and the sophomore has some earnings so we can make a Roth contribution, then we just go into a low cost brokerage firm like a Vanguard or a Schwab or a T. Rowe Price, and you just pop it into the Roth and maybe either buy a target date fund or just throw it into an index fund. Let's not make it too complicated here because kid's really young. But if you think you're going to need this money in 2 to 3 years, then you really cannot invest it. You cannot put that money at risk. Is that clear? So there was like 2 different ideas here. One is long-term retirement. The other one, short-term, couple 3 years. Then you just put it into a longer-term 2 or 3 year CD and be done with it. Okay? I hope that helps. All right. If you've got a financial question, why don't you give us a holler? You can do that by sending an email. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our sister broadcast. It is called the Jill on Money Podcast. And we drop it every single day, 7 days a week. Huh, how about that? That's for real. You can just go to our website, to JillOnMoney.com, and all the information about how you can subscribe to the Jill on Money podcast is right on that front door. Okay, we'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios. Capital One. This is Banking Reimagined. What's in your wallet? On to your questions. Tim writes, my significant other just sold a house and has $50,000 to invest for retirement. She's 52. What should she do? Who should she trust? Her son is in the process of selling the home he inherited from his grandmother. He's 30. I told him, and he agreed to take $50,000 of the money and invest it for his retirement. Where should he turn to for help? Oh, brother. Okay, Let's do the 30-year-old first. Has he really done everything he has to do? And the same thing with your significant other. Remember, do I have my big three covered? Do I have the money I need for, say, 6 to 12 months of my living expenses? Do I have that safe and secure? In other words, is my emergency reserve fund adequate? If not, you've got to use that 50 grand and do it and fund it. Okay, next. Do I have the ability to pay down outstanding consumer or student loan debt? So maybe her son has some old college loans. Pay him off. It's great. You could do it. Is there credit card debt? Get it done. And then finally, for at least both of them, I mean, I would say definitely him, but for her also, is there a retirement account already established? For him, does he have a 401k through work? Does he have a 403b? Does he have a Roth IRA? Can you use some of this money, here we are at the end of the year, and fund $6,000 this year, $6,000 next year? And presuming that you can do that, that kind of starts eating away at some of the money. For your significant other, same questions. And the answer to those questions will sort of guide you as to where to put the money. Now, what about the investments themselves? This is where you need to either have some sort of financial plan, or at least, as I was talking about earlier in the program, maybe run some retirement numbers or go to an online hybrid advisor like Betterment, Vanguard Personal Service Advisor, or Schwab Intelligent Portfolio. Go check those out and run some retirement numbers and work backwards as to how you should invest. That's my recommendation. Okay. When we return, we have a very special Thanksgiving double duo for our number 2 for the interview. So stay tuned. It's Jill on Money. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's hour number 2 of the Jill on Money show. And we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Go to policygenius.com. Well, here's what we thought. We thought Thanksgiving is usually a time where you are with your families, and, you know, it would be great if everyone could be with their families, but we know you're probably not. So we took 2 interviews that we conducted separately. One with a father who's an investment legend, was before the pandemic. And then one with a daughter who's got a legendary name and also works for the iconic brand that was created after the pandemic had already started. So we start this interview melange with Charles Schwab. Yeah, that guy, the Charles Schwab. And we are going to begin the story of how Charles Schwab started his investment company. Here is our interview with Charles Schwab. What is the best financial or career decision you've ever made?
Well, I think, of course, starting the company, having early passion about thinking that investors needed another kind of choice about investing. How do you go about it? The old traditional method of selling stocks through stock salesmen really ended up being really old-fashioned and very expensive and not really leading to the best outcome. So I started Charles Schwab and Company with a whole different view and a passion.
And what was the view of the street or these big brokerage firms when you opened your doors almost 50 years ago?
I always thought that the traditional firms created products or created their ideas about how much money they could make off the product first. That was the first decision. I tried a completely different way to look at things. What would be the best thing for customers? What would they really like first? And if they liked it and we could offer it to them and they picked up on it, then we would continue doing it. But if it didn't happen, that was unsuccessful, they didn't like it, we would stop doing it. It had nothing to do about making money. It was all about making a great deal for our clients.
And so what led you to think about the customer first? I mean, you come from a different mold. You don't come from a big Wall Street family.
Right.
You come from lawyers, right?
Right. Father was a lawyer, grandfather, etc. So I always thought, well, what's fair for people? Could we get more people to invest? Because investing, I came to the conclusion early on, because I read a lot of biographies about very successful people in the economy. And it came to be that the people who did investing, most of which did it in stocks, some did it in real estate, but investing is really a very powerful thing that made people change their lives in terms of their wealth lives, their success life in business.
And yet, when you started this company in the 70s, the vast majority of Americans were able to claim that they were part of a pension. They didn't have to feel like they had to invest. So talk a little bit about how the world of investing changed with the advent of the 401k and that more people were just becoming, I guess, introduced to the concept of investing.
Well, all that did occur. The 401ks were introduced, but I think even more important, more powerful movement that was going, people were beginning to live longer. Social Security was sort of a wonderful thing in the 30s when it was introduced. Average man lived until 65. Now that's almost 20 years later now. If you get up to that age, it's usually 80, 85 of the average, and some are very lucky and can live beyond that. So the advance in medical science, all those things, and better living and thoughtful way to go about lifestyle and so forth, we're all getting the benefit of that, of longer lives. Hence, Social Security simply will not be enough to take care of our lives that the way we have been accustomed, our modern lives, and we like to travel, we like vacations,
So when you started the company, talk about the beginning and when you felt like it's catching on. So if you're in the early 70s, you start this company, it's this crazy guy, Chuck. When did you feel like, okay, this is going to work?
Well, it happened. I started with 4 people with the concept of doing discounted commissions. That was a very simple kind of thing. And that was really started in 73. We began in a very rudimentary way to do that, and it got more and more perfected. And by 1975, the SEC and Congress changed the uniformity of commissions from something that had been in place for 200 years. They said, let's free it all up. It's free and open competition now, no more fixed rates. The next day, the newspaper had a couple articles about it. One was very important to me. Merrill Lynch raises the rates 3%. And I said, oh my God, I have got a heck of a business. If I can just keep it together, keep our people motivated and so forth, raise enough money to build the capital of the company, I got a heck of a business.
And then what led you to think you should sell the business?
Well, it was all a part of raising capital. I didn't have access to Wall Street. They hated me because I was a competitor, and when I was forming a strong competitive force. And so the last person they wanted to support was me.
Right.
Which is, looking back, is pretty funny, but many of them wish they had now because the stock price did really, really well over the next ensuing years. But at the very beginning, the money was a struggle, always trying to raise money, friends, relatives, and so forth. And that was not always completely successful, but we scraped along, and I convinced certain people that we had a great future, and maybe they ought to think about investment in the company. So eventually we did get there, but always that pressure. And so when Bank of America came around to buy us, and they flashed a couple numbers in front of me, and I came from nothing. I said, oh my God, that's a heck of a lot of money. Maybe I should consider that, because it really improved my net worth, going from 0 to
a lot,
20 million.
What happened when they make this investment in you? Are you allowed to run Charles Schwab as a wholly owned sub, or did they try to integrate you?
No. I insisted upon. We kept our same auditors, our same attorneys, our same staff. I had a separate board, so we were completely sort of an independent subsidiary. But yes, they owned all our stock, so they could pull the switch on me if they wanted to at any particular time. But they didn't, and they let us flourish. And we grew from 1981 right on through to 1985. We kept compounding and compounding. So all the stuff we were doing at Schwab was fantastic. Our customers really loved us. and we did perform really well for the bank. But the bank fell into bad times.
Itself, the bank is separate of you.
The parent company fell into bad times. It had some bad loans to South America. Shippers in Greece were canceling on some of their debt, and they had lots of issues to deal with. So the bank fell in these bad times and started selling a few assets. They had to sell their building. They sold this thing. And then finally I said, why don't you sell my company back to me? And we eventually worked out that transaction.
And when did that happen?
That happened in 1987.
Oh, what a funny year to have something big happen.
Oh, yeah. that was, as I call the Tsunami Year. That was all kinds of things went on. So it's a very interesting thing in the book itself. Talks about these things. It was fun for me to go back and recast all the little elements that we had to go through, but it's a pretty exciting time.
We'll get back to more of our interview with Charles Schwab in just a minute. Hey, during the break, why don't you go to our website, JillOnMoney.com, and there you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Comes out every Friday. Mark does a great job with that. Check it out, JillOnMoney.com. Sign up for that free newsletter, and we will be right back, continuing with our interview with Charles Schwab.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are so delighted to air this interview that we conducted with Charles Schwab. Yeah, that Charles Schwab, that guy, the one who started the huge company. And he was a real outsider. I mean, you know Charles Schwab now as this massive, establishment investment company. But, he was an outsider, and he was an outsider, geographically being on the West Coast. He was an outsider in terms of mindset, and he was an outsider in the way that he thought that investors should be managing their money. Very different. And in this part of our interview with Charles Schwab, we're talking about kind of like what are the habits of mind of a Schwab investor? What makes that investor different? So as we promised, we are doing this father-daughter thing. So right now we're in the middle of the father interview with Charles Schwab. A little bit later in the program, we're going to get to the daughter, his daughter, Carrie Schwab Pomerantz. But right now, more of our interview with Charles Schwab. Do individuals who are trading at Schwab jump ship, or do they stay in?
Well, for the most part, people stand. I mean, there's a fraction, might be 2 or 3% that sort of panic as such. But, experienced investors know markets do go down. And unfortunately, when they do go down, they go down much faster than they go up. And so recoveries always take a little bit more time than the actual drop. But the drop, for most of us, think it's an opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
You're buying things at incredible prices.
I love when people go nuts about when the market goes down. And I said, wait, you're buying into your 401k 6% cheaper than you did 6 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Be happy about that.
I mean, we all go to sales all over the world, but when stocks are on sales, it seems like people are more fearful.
How was the advent of online trading? What did that mean for your company?
Our efficiency of doing a trade has grown and grown and grown. So the cost of us doing a trade is very nominal, frankly. And so we reduced our prices all the way along for the last 20 years or so until we find, let's make trading just free.
Which is a mind-blowing concept. I'm so sad that my father's not alive to see this, because I remember he used to say, we're on our way to zero. And people would be like, what are you, crazy, Al? I'll be like, you're not, zero? They got to make money, right?
Yeah,
There's no...
yeah.
So now you went from, was it $4.95 or probably less?
$4.95.
But let's just call it $5 to trade. Now it goes to zero. And people are thinking, wait a minute. How are these guys making money?
Yeah.
What are they going to do to make up for that $5 that they're losing?
Well, there's a variety of ways. We have people who use us as an advisor, so we charge a small fee for doing that if you want an advised account. We have a bank, so we make some money on the interest rates between what interest rates are and what we pay our clients in terms of their deposit accounts. So there's always little ways to make money, but the most critical thing is to have customers. And have a lot of customers. And so we are very proud about the fact that we have almost $4 trillion, and I say that with a T, of client assets with us. And so given all that, we thought, well, why not? Let's deliver on to our clients a greater value, like zero, and so maybe we'll attract more customers.
What do you think about the advent of robo-advisors? You have a service through Charles Schwab where you can put your money into an account and basically take your risk profile and an algorithm's going to do the rest. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's an incredibly efficient way for the average person doesn't have the time to be thinking about this stock or that stock and go through all the machinations of, the market's down, I should buy. We do it for you sort of automatically. And we also do tax loss harvesting for you, meaning we sell the stocks that you might have had a little loss in the portfolio and garner the loss there, so offset gains that you might have in your account. There's all kinds of things that we do automatically for people. That's really a simple way to sort of accumulate money over a long period of time.
So I guess the question is, if we watched you guys be the ones who broke through and pushed down trading costs to zero, could you ever see a time where advice pricing starts to drop in a similar way? I mean, now there's no guy sitting in a big fat Merrill Lynch office who really can get away with charging 8.25% for a mutual fund anymore, right?
No.
Okay. So I would presume that if Charles Schwab and Vanguard are both making the jump into advice, that is going to put price pressure downward. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think advice is a different thing. It's a complicated education process that goes on. And what has happened over the last bunch of years is schools don't do enough education about financial decision making. What should I do in my life and all of that? So I'm doing a lot of work in financial literacy, but I think people got to get a little bit informed. What are my requirements? What do I have to do in an overall sense so they're not just completely deaf and dumb about the whole thing? But they've got to put some time in to understand what it is to mean about saving. What am I trying to do? What's my goals? What's my opportunity?
Is the age of a managed mutual fund coming to an end?
Yes, I think so. Index funds have been so prominent in the last 10 years or so. They've grown to half of the new funds that are being built up today. And so it's very difficult to compete against an index fund because the costs are so much higher than an index fund. And so people want to go lower costs.
Do you think that there is a danger? There are some folks who are running around saying, hey, you know what? Everybody's in the index. Market goes down. Everyone's going to try to get out at the same time. It's going to be a cascading downside risk that we've now all piled into.
I don't think it's going to be any different than before. The market might drop on those really awful days, 10%, 15%, but you don't go in investing with the thought that it's going to be always an up day. There has to be many down days, too, along the way. That's what markets do. And you just have to have that pure and simple understanding markets are going to fluctuate.
Do you think that it was helpful that you were outside of like the New York Wall Street crowd, that you could think beyond the way business was done?
Oh, boy. When I think back of my background, there are many lucky moments, but I think the luck was for me that I was brought up on the West Coast, went to Stanford, and was around a lot of innovative type people. And so being on the West Coast, I wasn't part of Wall Street and the old-fashioned ways of doing things. I could think about what would customers really like if we were to really develop something new and different.
So I interviewed Michael Lewis a while back.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Yeah. He lives in Oakland.
Yes, he does. And we had this very funny conversation because he said, we were talking about how so much of investing, there is an element where people start talking it as if it were gambling. And he says, it's not gambling. He said, if you talk to really old-time traders and investors, they'll never tell you about their best trade. They'll always tell you about their worst trade. And he said, and that's what I found interviewing golfers. Professional golfers never tell me about their best round of golf. They tell me how the 3 holes that blew the whole tournament.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering for you what you feel like is misunderstood among the investment community about that this is not gambling. So what is it? What is it? How should we be thinking about this?
Well, I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about that. I mean, to me, the lottery is gambling. You go down, buy your ticket for $2 and forget about it. And later they whirl the pool and all of a sudden the winning number comes out. Investing, you're actually buying into. Think about the fact the first time you loved McDonald's hamburger And then all of a sudden, gee, that's pretty interesting. Then you notice they build a second McDonald's hamburger, and then he built a third. Well, what does that really mean? It means they have more customers. And all of a sudden now they got 10,000 McDonald's. And so there's been an enormous accretion in value created by that company. That's called growth. And that's what you really can get in investing in great companies who have long history of serving customers. Therefore, customers pay good money for these things, and they build new outfits, new ideas, new innovation. That's what the crux of our great system here in America is all about, the innovation of new things and the creativity of mind to do that and allow us to do that. And by doing that, you're creating value, and that's investors who see that and identify those great growth opportunities. They're the successful investors.
Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Charles Schwab in just a minute. And, you hear us talk about Charles Schwab quite a bit. We are agnostic when it comes to investment companies, meaning that we love Charles Schwab, but we love lots of different investment companies as long as they have cheap costs of investing. So we'll get back to our interview with Charles Schwab in just a minute. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the program that attempts to take the mystery out of your financial life, but it's also where we try to provide you with some cool interviews of iconic folks. Today we are airing an interview that we conducted with Charles Schwab before the pandemic started. And, in this next part of the interview, I think you should listen carefully because it's funny. When we were talking about this topic, market timing specifically, think of what we have just gone through this year. Come into the year, bull market, things are going great, right? January, February, markets make all the indexes, brand new, fresh, all-time highs. It's happening, right? And many of you at that time would contact us and say, I'm going to pile in, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And then the pandemic hits. And then we have a third of the value of the stock market lopped off in 5 weeks. At that time, some of you probably were tempted to sell. I know. We heard from you. And we also know that in retrospect, that would have been a terrible decision. The idea of somehow knowing when you can buy or sell or time the peaks and valleys of the market is something that is elusive. It's something we want to be able to do so badly. But guys, it is impossible. And if you don't believe me and you don't believe your own experience in doing that, then check out Charles Schwab, investor legend, Charles Schwab, about why timing the market just doesn't work. Here's more of our interview with Chuck Schwab. We've been getting some questions. We take listeners, they call up and they want to ask us questions, and they'll often say things like, well, I want to get 100% out of the market, or I want to put all my money in. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with trying to time the market?
I've never been successful at it. Sometimes I think I can, and I've tried it many, many times, of course, when I think a bottom is hit. And I would say of the last 10 bottoms, I probably was correct maybe 1 out of the 10 times. And I was really happy about that. When I encouraged my daughter, get in now. Today's the day. November 9th is the day to get in. We were actually skiing. I said, today's the day. We finished that after that morning of skiing. Said, looking at the reports today, this is the day. Take every penny you have in your pocketbook and put it in the market. But that doesn't happen every time.
So how do you look at the landscape now? You are in the Bay Area. There's a lot of innovation. We're hearing so much about many of these companies, these unicorns who are remaining private for much longer than, say, folks who did in your time when you were before you went public. What's the upside and downside of being a public versus a private company? And is there any lesson that we should take in observing it?
Well, it's quite important. It's your access to capital. a company grows and needs capital, needs new capital. It just doesn't fall off of trees blindly. So you want to induce investors to see your opportunity and of course buy your stock and so forth. It also allows those people who worked for you for a long period of time. I always like to participate, have every one of my employees participate in the upside of the company, that they are bought into the concept, the purpose of what we do as a company, and that's truly important to have that public availability because, we're now a 40-year-old company. Many people are retiring, so why shouldn't they be able to take their stock and convert to cash and to fixed income that will support them through the retirement years?
Talk about the financial services landscape. Is there anything at this point in your career that keeps you up at night? Is there anything that you're worried about?
I think we're in fantastic shape. I think the advent of technology over the last 20 years, the internet has just brought all this flow of information to everyone. And so it's a great value. Financial services are a fantastic value for people, just like some other things in modern world today because the advent of technology.
What about these fintech companies that were really looking like hot, and then folks like Schwab jumped in and sort of ate their lunch? So if I had a fintech company 5 years ago that I thought was like, oh, I'm on the way to getting $1 billion valuation. Now you're in the business and Vanguard's in the business. Is my fintech company now not worth quite as much?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, we all look at great ideas, and so nobody in our business is above copying a great idea. And we see a great idea, or some people going to zero commissions will say, or something else, a robo thing. It's a great idea, and customers really like it. Man, we're going to go right into it also.
How would you decide whether to buy that or to create it?
Well, it's very simple mathematics. How much will it cost you to build that capability? And if the little firm has some really outstanding ideas, patents and so forth, we'll try to buy them.
Do you have an insurance arm as part of Schwab?
We have some insurance. It's very modest in size. We've never been big advancers of insurance thing, and we think it's somewhat expensive. In fact, that may be another opportunity.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that it would be great if someone like, let's say, Chuck Schwab could say, yeah, the idea of an annuity is so appealing, right? It is, because in your brain, in your little, human brain, you say, yeah, I just want someone to pay me with my money. I want my own pension. But, of course, the insurance industry, I'll say you don't have to, is a bunch of pigs, and they charge too much to create that.
Oh, it's very, annuities are incredibly expensive. And not only that, then you get locked in. If something changes in your life, something dramatic happens, and you want to reverse it all. There are other ways, I think, to go about it that are similar, highly competitive, lower costs, and so we'll be helping our clients with those kinds of decisions.
I can't wait for that. We started the interview, and I said, what was your best career or money decision? You said your best career decision was starting this company.
Right.
What was your worst?
Oh, my goodness. It's all outlined in my book. I've had many little...
Pick your worst.
Pick my worst. Well, that's part of life. You got to have some... burn your fingers along the way, and then you don't do it again. And one that has to almost learn most of my things by personal experience. I try to read about it, but nothing better and more informative than doing it yourself.
Okay, well, that's the first half of the Schwab family for this Thanksgiving weekend. When we return, we're going to talk to Carrie Schwab Pomerantz. She is Charles Schwab's daughter, who actually works at the company now. So stay tuned here at Jill on Money. When we return, it's Carrie Schwab Pomerantz. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of a show or want to check out a past show, go to JillOnMoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. It's Thanksgiving weekend, and it's a family affair here on the program today. First few segments of this second hour, we were able to air an interview that I conducted with Charles Schwab before the pandemic. Now we have his daughter, Carrie Schwab Pomerantz. Now, she has taken a slightly different path. She has an expertise in family finance, in consumer education, corporate philanthropy. She has figured out a way to be a very vocal advocate for people taking control of their own financial lives. And Carrie starts the interview off talking about some of the research that the company conducted about the state of retirement in the United States right now.
We conducted research among folks that are between 55 and 75 years old with at least $100,000 in investable assets. And that included retirement. So this is a more affluent group. And we know that the term retirement really is constantly evolving, right? It's not the way our grandparents retired. And so we wanted to see how people are feeling in today's, climate with all that's been going on. And I have to tell you, it's very interesting that the majority of these folks are very confident about their retirement lifestyle. They have not been, at least emotionally, impacted by the pandemic, the market volatility, the job losses, at least in their minds, as you would think. But there was definitely some disconnects with, confidence versus reality.
Tell me about that disconnect.
These people have been saving since their 20s and 30s, which, as you know, Jill, I advocate for every young person to get started. So that's pretty extraordinary that these people did. Two things that came about. One is that many of them, about, I think over 60%, did not have a financial plan. Yeah. Therefore, they saved $920,000, which sounds like a lot of money. It's almost $1 million. But they believe that they're going to generate about $135,000 a year from their portfolio, or at least.
Hold on. Wait a second. Let's go back a second. Let's break that down. Let's round it up. From my $1 million, I'm going to generate how much per year?
They believe they need $135,000 a year to live. Social Security, as you know, isn't going to cover $130,000. $1 million, if you expect a 30-year retirement, you want to make sure that you don't outlive your money. You should spend about 4% of that, which is about $40,000 a year. So the point is that they might not realize, or hopefully they have other sources of income to cover that $135,000.
And I would even go so far as to say that the 4% withdrawal rate is probably even overstating it, given that bond yields are so low. Let's say that on that $1 million, it's really more like 3 or 3.5%. And now what you're concerned about is you have no idea where they think they're going to get the rest of that money, right?
Yes. And then the other part, as I mentioned, they didn't have a financial plan. And I know that that's probably a concept that's been promoted for, more recently, or people think it's for rich people or whatever. But a financial plan is really for everybody. And it gives you the step-by-step sort of process, or first of all, it takes a look at all the money you have, all the assets, all the liabilities, and sort of what your goals are. And then it helps you create that step-by-step process to get where you want. So I think a lot of people, because of the pandemic, are now seeking out more financial help, more financial plans. But the bottom line is had they gotten, some direction earlier in their lives, they probably would have saved a lot more.
I mean, I guess that in general, I'm not surprised that people don't do planning. But what's interesting to me is, here is an organization, Charles Schwab as an organization, which really broke through historically and brought the pricing of investment services down dramatically. I'm getting the sense in listening to you talk that this is just sort of in that same strain, which is you now, in general at Schwab, of course, there are expensive financial planners who clear through Schwab. That's one thing. But that you also are now bringing that idea of a more cost-efficient way to invest into the planning side. So can you talk a little bit about the kind of planning work at Schwab that you do that makes it there's less friction? Like, what is it about what you guys are doing that's allowing people to access the idea of planning more efficiently or cheaper and without the feeling like, oh my God, I have to undress and give everything over to someone else?
We feel that everybody should have a financial plan because that's the only way you're really going to get to financial security. or the life that you really want. So, like you said, we're taking the friction out wherever possible. And I have to tell you, through market volatilities, Jill, I don't know if I've ever shared with you, but I also use an expert to help manage my money. I always share with people that even the experts get help because you do better, right? And you learn and you stay on track. And, for somebody like, me or, with kids and a big job running around, I don't really have time for that. It's not about that I can't do it. It's just I don't have time. And so with the market volatilities, like back in the Great Recession, when the market went down 50%, I said to my RIA, I said, oh my God, the phones must be ringing off the hook for you, Mike. He said, no, Carrie, everybody has their plan. Everybody has their asset allocation that reflects their risk tolerance. We've only had one guy call and he's a nervous Nelly and he always finds reasons to call. So the point is that a financial plan, in particular, one component is the investment plan. It reflects your goals, your risk tolerance, and then you can ride these, the volatility and feel confident that over the long term, you're going to be okay.
We'll get back to our interview with Carrie Schwab Pomerantz in just a second. During this break, maybe what you should do is head over to JillOnMoney.com. There you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Okay, we'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. We're broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. And now we are going to conclude our father-daughter interview segment this Thanksgiving weekend with the rest of our interview with Carrie Schwab Pomerantz. She is talking about how to balance the needs of you and your financial life and the needs of being a good parent. Here's the rest of our interview with Carrie Schwab Pomerantz. One of the things I just wanted to focus on is the idea about how to help people prioritize. And I think that essentially the idea of paying down debt and also, putting money into your retirement and getting that emergency reserve fund. But I feel like there are people who are really juggling a lot of family issues, especially right now, right? And, everyone's home and this, that, and the other thing. And then there's this idea that I have to do for my kids. I've got to get these kids to college. And what's your view on balancing the amount of money that you're investing for your kids, maybe it's college plan, versus saving for your own retirement? That's one of the most frequently asked questions that we field here.
Well, my position is not very popular, Jill. So just to kind of reiterate what you had mentioned, because I think it's important for your listeners, the three most important money savings areas are, like you said, your 401k up to the company match. As we know, a lot of companies, not every company, but a lot of companies match doubling your savings. You can't get that kind of rate of return anywhere else, and you need it for retirement. So that's first. The second is paying off high interest, non-deductible debt. Again, that's like credit cards. And remember, we're paying what, 15% or more interest rate. That can go back to your savings. And then the emergency fund, as we already talked about, so you don't have to sell any stock at a low or so forth. Those are the three highest priorities. Then it's retirement again. After that, you can start thinking about my child's college education, buying a home, buying a second home, whatever it is. The reason we put college education last is the bottom line is you can't get a loan, you can't get a scholarship for retirement, but your child can. I think you're doing your child a disservice by depleting your retirement for them, because you will become a burden later in life. And I don't think any parent wants to do that.
Well, that's it. That's the program. During the week, don't forget, we're always here for you, so you can always go onto the website. But most importantly, don't forget to wash your hands, to wear your masks, to maintain that physical distancing, and try to do something nice for someone else today. We'll talk to you next weekend.